I want to suggest to you this morning that Samson is one of the most toxic examples of leadership that you will find within the entire Bible. Why is that? Why do people describe him that way? For one simple reason. Samson was a man entirely controlled by his appetites. His appetite for sex, his appetite for violence, his appetite for drama. Let me tell you the story, the middle story of Samson's journey of when he tried to get married. So he went down and he met this nice girl, and his parents said, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" And he said, "Yeah, I want to marry this girl." So he wanted to marry this girl. So on the wedding day, it wasn't exciting enough that he was getting married. He decided to try and spice things up by introducing the famous riddle-telling competition. And he thought, hey, this will make the day more fun. But then he lost the riddle-telling competition, much to his shock. He's absolutely furious about it, stormed off. They gave his wife to someone else. He came back a few months later, was like, "I want my wife back now." We've given it to someone else. You didn't think you wanted to get married to her anymore. Right, well in that case, then I'm really taking it out on you. Destroyed the crops of the Philistines. Then they had a big fight with him. He killed loads of people. A few months, he retreated back to the Israelites, who then said, "Hey, we've got to give you back to the Philistines because you've caused so much trouble." Fine, give him back to the Philistines. Gave them back to the Philistines. He broke his bonds, killed 1,000 people with a donkey's jawbone. Just enjoy your wedding day. Isabel Hamley is... Actually, she's the chaplain to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and she's written a couple of books on Judges, which some of the resources we've been using. And this is how she describes Samson. Samson is a man-child, impulsive, without control over his emotions, unable to consider others' feelings, and oblivious to the consequences of his actions. This is why it's really important to have both women and men like commentating and teaching on Scripture, because all the guys go, "He's a bit of a lad. He's a bit of a lad, that Samson." And all the women are going, "Are you mental? He's completely lost it. What is wrong with you?" So that's why it's important to have both, all kinds of people commentating on Scriptures. So the problem for Samson is, as you will recognize, and many of us will know this story from ourselves, is that if you don't control your appetites, if you don't get control of addictive patterns of behavior, of habits, they will control you. And they may eventually lead you to ruin. Samson is supposed to be a cautionary tale. You're supposed to read Samson's story and go, wow, things have got pretty bad if that guy was in charge. And yet, actually, many of us will know this story. Many of us will have lived this story ourselves, or with friends or family members whose appetites, whose addictive patterns of behavior ended up being self-destructive. The problem for us is that we live in a culture which celebrates indulgence rather than discipline, rather than self-denial. I mean, if you say, I want my life to be a model of self-denial and self-discipline, other people around you will look at you like you're weird, like you're from a different planet. That is not the narrative of the world in which we live. The narrative of the world in which we live is one of indulgence and freedom. We think that, a life lived to the full is a life that we get to kind of indulge our appetites and feed them. The problem is that if you feed an appetite, it doesn't go away, it only grows. One of the most interesting commentators on this, he's a bit controversial, I know, but one of the most interesting commentators on this is Russell Brand, who's been a broadcaster and actor, done all sorts of things, and he's written a lot about his own journey out of addiction and into recovery. This is just a really interesting quote from his book on recovery, and he says this, he says, "We've been taught that freedom is the freedom to pursue our petty, trivial desires. But real freedom is freedom from our petty, trivial desires." We do think that freedom is freedom to do whatever you want. And he says, well, what if real freedom is freedom from the appetites and desires that lead us, that take control of us and lead us into self-destructive paths and maybe even to the edge of ruin? For the first generation of Christians, this would have been a very familiar conversation because they lived in a world in which Samson would have been as happy as a pig in mud. I mean, if you think about the first century world in which most Christians live, everything that Samson loved, you could do on an average day. By the time you'd been to the bathhouse, the temple of Aphrodite, the forum for a little bit of political drama, the slave market, and the arena. Honestly, you've seen it all, haven't you? It's all going on right there. And so for the first generation of Christians, planting churches all the way through the known world into this culture, one of the things they were absolutely clear about was that they were calling, in the light of the lifestyle they had in Israel and the light of the teaching in the person of Jesus, they had to call people to a different path, a better path than that of the society around them. One of the things that made Christianity attractive to the people in the surrounding culture was the sense of order and purpose that it brought to people's lives and to their homes. Christians were called to order their internal worlds, to order their lives, to order their families and their homes in such a way that it reflected the order and the goodness of God. And people in the surrounding culture looked at that and went, that is really interesting. It's really weird, but it's really interesting. I kind of like it. I'm kind of interested in it. How might I find out more? It was actually a powerful witness. So I'm going to read to you from Colossians chapter 3. Since then, you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Okay, that's all very nice. That all sounds very noble, very meaningful. What does that actually mean in practice? Well, here we go. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature. Samson, really? Do I have to? Sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in these ways in the life you once lived. That's because you were part of a Roman citizen in the first century. But now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge, in the image of its creator. For a person, for a culture stuck in appetites that they can't manage, in addictive patterns and besetting habits, whether they're obvious things like a problematic relationship to alcohol or drugs, or whether they're the much more hidden things that only we know about. These words speak to us today. They say, actually, Jesus doesn't just call you to be forgiven. He calls you into a process of life change, by which the power of those habits, the power of those appetites can be broken, and you can actually be changed and transformed.
Come, let's draw close to worship him this morning. Worshiping the King of Kings. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. Lord, I want to see you. This is our prayer this morning. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. Lord, I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see Jesus. See you, Lord. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Just open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you.
Jesus.
I want to see you. See you high. See you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Yes, you are. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. This is our prayer this morning. Holy, holy, holy. Yes, you're holy, holy, holy. You are holy, holy, holy. I want to see. Let's sing that again. Holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. We lift you up, Lord. Holy, holy, holy. You are holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. You are holy, holy, holy. Yes, you are holy, holy, holy. I want to see you high, see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. See you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Yes, open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. Lord, I want